On this episode of the Pause Menu, I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. Recently, there has been a lot of news stories going around about a very popular game key selling site known as G2A. Now, for whatever reason, this site has been around for a while and controversy hasn't been something that it's avoided, but right now it's getting more talk in the news. G2A, for those who aren't familiar, is a key selling site sort of like eBay, but for game keys. But the latest controversy surrounding G2A is on how they obtain some of their keys and how it can actually harm some developers. With some developers even telling people on Twitter if they plan on buying their game from G2A, they would rather them steal the game instead. With such bold claims, I decided I wanted to reach out to some of these developers and try to understand where they are coming from and why they would say such a thing. Telling someone to pirate your game seems pretty drastic, and I wanted to try to understand why they would make such a claim. The issue became, I actually received a lot of pushback from developers on this topic, saying they really don't want to go into detail on the record. After talking to several, I was able to lock in 3 developers that were willing to go into a lot of detail about what they have experienced with G2A, but 2 wanted to remain anonymous, and only 1 was willing to go on the record. The developer that was willing to go on the record was Dave Johnson, developer of Another Star from Vision Riders Entertainment. Another Star was released in 2014 with a Steam release the following year. The first thing I wanted to shed some light on, which a lot of people already know, but I wanted to hear it from a developer, is where the keys actually come from. Since G2A is strictly a key selling site, the keys have to be generated somewhere, so I wanted to confirm exactly how this happens. Johnson and the 2 developers all basically told me the same thing. When a title is getting a Steam release, the developer has to request keys from Valve themselves, with one of the anonymous developers telling me that Valve can be at times very strict on just how many keys a developer will be given, because at the end of the day they don't want a developer simply using Steam as a device to host their game. It makes sense considering they want to make money too. A developer basically puts in a request for the amount of keys that they want, and if it's approved by Valve, they then obtain the keys. Then they're able to do whatever they want with them. Some are given to reviewers to review the game, others are given away for giveaways to help spread the word, but others can also be given to other storefronts. The reason some developers will give their keys away to other stores is because they focus on smaller games. Steam sometimes has a problem of being able to surface certain smaller games, and these other stores help out with this issue. This will become important for later conversations I had with Johnson. The next question I had is probably the most interesting, and the one that is sort of the most confusing. At what point is it possible for developers to even have these keys stolen? Johnson detailed a scenario where over 1,000 keys and possibly more were actually stolen from him. He told me about a scenario where he provided about 1,500 keys to a company called Indie Game Stand, which was a storefront that specialized in indie games and tried to help smaller developers gain exposure. The site launched in 2012 but was shut down eventually in 2017. During the time the store was open, Johnson told me that Another Star sold 49 copies during its run. Obviously very shy of the 1,500 or so keys Johnson provided. But in 2017, he noticed something, that a lot of keys were being redeemed from Indie Game Stand, which had actually already been shut down at this time. And it wasn't a small number either. It was over 1,000 keys. Johnson was able to revoke access from the stolen keys, but he doesn't know how they got out, so someone that could have paid for the key and had no idea it was stolen might have lost access. To say how the keys got out is really hard to pin down, and Johnson wasn't even able to provide any details or a guess. But the most important factor is that somebody made money on those keys. And how it affects Johnson is that whether the keys were purchased knowingly to be stolen or not, the fact that someone now has an official copy of the game comes with its own list of issues. One of the anonymous developers was able to back this statement up saying, "Well, when you release a game, there is a long list of issues that people just don't think about. The biggest one being support. When there is an issue, it falls solely on me. I'm only one person, and I'm responsible for everything, and providing support to someone who purchased a stolen key nets me 0 revenue in the end. Whereas someone who pirates the game, they are much less likely to ever reach out for support. They simply move on since they have no financial investment." The developer continued and said that G2A simply gives people who steal keys a place to get rid of them fast and easy with 0 repercussion. While I was reaching out to the developers for this story, GTA has also fired back a few times stating that this is such a non-issue because less than 1% of all their transactions are fraudulent, to which Johnson had this to say, "I seriously doubt the fraud rate is that low, and in my case, it was more than a few stolen keys." One of the anonymous developers was a little more aggressive in their answer, stating, "G2A is lying, and it will bite them in the ass. It could be a case where what they're classifying as fraudulent falls into their 1%, but from my experience, that number's just bullshit. Either they are dumb and have no idea what they are tracking, or they are flat out lying. Either way, it hurts." Whether or not GTA is lying is really impossible to say, But the most important thing is how to get this issue fixed. And when I asked these questions, one developer told me that this is very largely on Valve, and here's what he had to say. Getting exposure for a game is next to impossible these days without putting in significant work. Valve owns the market for better or for worse, and they absolutely suck at helping smaller developers get exposed. You can make the argument that Valve simply provides services for developers large and small to get their game into the hands of people, but then they shouldn't take such a huge cut if that's all they're doing. It seriously hurts us smaller devs. They need to do more if they want smaller devs to prosper. Stealing keys has become easier, and they are responsible for a majority of it. Stuff like Humble Bundle, which used to be a great way to get exposure and make extra cash, has now become a way for thieves to steal keys. What this developer is referring to is a feature that used to be part of Humble Bundle, which was a way for small developers to make some extra money by providing their games to be part of a bundle for cheap, as well as for charity. When a consumer would buy a bundle, the redemption process was simply linking their Steam account to Humble and hitting a button that would automatically transfer the access and the digital license to their Steam account. But in 2016, this feature was removed, and instead a key was basically provided for someone to copy and paste into the redemption field. Johnson also stated that this feature going away made it easier for people to steal keys. Here's what he had to say. A lot of this issue is entirely in Valve's hands, not the devs. As a minor example, Valve used to have a system where you could press a button in your Humble account and it would automatically activate the game through Steam. No Steam keys were normally shown to the user, making it much more difficult to steal. Valve has discontinued this service, unfortunately. Solutions like this would be a big help. Unfortunately, no one has all the answers to fix this issue, but all three of these devs did agree that G2A is a problem. But the reason that this whole thing started and the reason I was so interested was the last question I asked all of them is that, do you really want people to pirate your games over buying a key on G2A? This is what Johnson had to say. Personally, this is a sentiment I agree with. I'm not getting any money when you buy a stolen copy of the game, so you might as well just pirate the game instead of rewarding a thief. One of the anonymous developers had this to say, and again was much more aggressive. G2A can claim whatever they want, but the fact is I don't see any revenue from them. Maybe my situation is different from a larger publisher that sells millions of their games, but their 1% claim is bullshit. Yes, pirate my game before you even Google G2A. The amount of crap I have to deal with from card chargebacks to support just isn't worth my time. I have enough to do without having to try and hunt down how a key was stolen and given to G2A, who doesn't provide any details or even wants to work with me on this issue. And instead I've tried to turn this into a publicity stunt, and this is just another reason not to support them. They need to disappear. So there you have it. There's just a couple developers with their take on this whole G2A situation. Now in this video, I'm not going to give my opinion on the situation because I really wanted to just focus on what these developers had to say. So if you'd like to hear my opinion, maybe I'll make another video. Let me know in the comments below. But this whole thing is kind of messy, but I am curious what people have to say about this topic. And if you shop at G2A, is this something that's going to stop you? Let me know in the comments below. Hit that like and subscribe button. It really helps us out. And we'll see you next time.